Yeah, I do think that once you're an introvert for life. And the way you show up as an introvert in the world can change. Being more comfortable, leaning outside of your introversion. And I will also say being more comfortable using your introversion. So a big focus of my coaching in my practice is to help introverted individuals tap into their strengths. I use a framework called appreciative coaching, which is all about identifying the best of who you are, which is known as your positive core, all of your strengths, including those that are associated with your introversion, like being a strategic thinker. Introverts tend to be highly empathetic. We're very good at data analysis. We tend to be very good writers. Just a few examples. So I guide people to figure out how can you use those strengths to show up more powerfully at work.
Hello and welcome back to Leading with Integrity. Today we're going to be learning about introversion and leadership and where and how the two things cross over. It's a subject we have covered in the past, but it's been about a year or so, I think, at least, since we last talked about it in any great detail. And to help me explore this subject once again, today I'm joined by Stacey Chazin, the leadership coach for introverts. So we'll be talking about it from both perspectives, the introverted team member who's struggling to make their voice heard and get noticed as a potential leader, and the leader or manager of introverts and how best to support them, help them get the most from their careers and more. We'll also talk a bit about extroverts as well, because it's unavoidable when you're talking about introversion to also talk about the opposite, and some of the assumptions, myths, misconceptions around these two ideas and their real true impact on the workplace. And Myers-Briggs personality testing comes up a little bit as well. So there's plenty of interesting threads to keep us engaged and entertained in this episode. And if you've ever struggled with confidence, imposter syndrome, or being an introvert, then this is an episode for you.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Stacey, welcome to Leading with Integrity. Great to have you on the show. We're going to have a really interesting conversation today, I know, about introversion and all other things around that and leadership, I'm sure.
Yep.
So thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and to start us off, over to you, really. Tell us a bit about your career so far, your background, what you do today, why you do it, all of those wonderful things.
Oh, my favorite story to tell. So I studied marketing and communication in college. I'll start there, and immediately took what I majored in college to a career in public relations, because it was a great mix, I thought, of my marketing degree and my communications degree. Little did I know that as an introvert, that probably was not the best space for me to be in. And while I loved how I got to write and create strategic proposals and plans, picking up the phone and pitching stories to people I didn't know, I hated that. And this was the mid-90s, so we didn't have email yet. There was one person in the office who had dial-up internet service, and that was pretty exciting if you could go into his office and get on his AOL. So it very much was, I had to interact with people personally and verbally, and it was very uncomfortable for me. I stayed in that career for about 10 years and realized it just wasn't right for me. You know, once you start something, I think it's hard to switch. But I had a realization, an epiphany that this was just not for me, not how I wanted to spend my life. I decided to go back to school and get a master's in public health, so I could be in a career where I thought I would be able to make more of a difference in people's lives. And I came out of that. I got a job working for a health policy think tank in New Jersey, and began working on programs that were focused on improving access to care for underserved populations. And I loved the work. And but what I found was, and I realized I had felt this way in my PR career as well, that I was struggling to show up with my talents, with my true strengths, with my default settings. And I was getting a lot of feedback, both formal and informal, that I needed to be different somehow, that I needed to be more social, more outgoing. I needed to be better at networking. I needed to speak up more in meetings. And I struggled to do that. And I had this wonderful experience, wonderful opportunity in this job where everyone on staff got to take a Myers-Briggs type indicator assessment, or MBTI. And for any members of your audience not familiar with MBTI, it's the world's most commonly used personality assessment. Everyone at the company got to do this. And I started learning about, basically it tells you how you're wired, how you best are going to show up in the world. And for me, part of that was learning that I am in fact introverted. And I started this launched me on a whole path of being more curious about what makes me tick as a leader, learning about other people, and realizing that our best path to success as professionals and as leaders is when we tap into our strengths, we tap into our default settings, rather than trying to pretend to be something we're not. Fast forward a little bit, I decided to go back to school and get a master's in organizational development and leadership. That's how just really enamored I became with the leadership field, and came out of that knowing that my mission from this point forward in my career was to coach other introverted professionals to figure out how to tap into their strengths, not deny their introversion, but lean into it. And so I started a business called the I Factor, which is focused on igniting introverted leadership. And that's where I am today.
Okay. Wow. Well, we went through quite a lot of things there in quite a short
Quite a
space of
lot,
time,
yes.
didn't we? Yeah. So, I mean, an interesting career jump particularly from PR to health. I mean, was there something specific that drew you to the public health field, or was it more a general desire to help people rather than what you had been doing, or a bit of both?
Yeah, that's a great question. Part of it was I wanted to have a career where I felt like I was impacting lives positively. And to be frank, I also had a number of healthcare experiences in my family that highlighted for me what a difference it makes when people have information, when they have support from the healthcare system, and when information and support are both tailored to where you are in your life and the needs that you have. And I think, as often happens when we have personal experiences, they sometimes drive us to veer in a different direction. So that's what happened to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Totally different context, but me too. That's why I do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And so we're going to get into introversion and leadership in a little bit. But one thing I'd love to explore a little bit from your story there, the feedback you were getting about, and it was ringing bells for me as well. Like, you need to speak up more in meetings, and you're not enthusiastic enough was the one I used to get a lot. Don't know if you ever got that one. Did you find that as frustrating as I did, in terms of people expecting you to fit into a mold of what they perceived a leader or a good worker, even in inverted commas, should look like, versus actually how you are and how you can still be productive?
That's a great question. I would say that when I was younger and earlier in my career, it didn't occur to me to question it, that this was some mold that I just didn't fit into. I really internalized that as, this is what I need to do to be successful, to be seen as a leader. So I better figure out how to do it. And it wasn't until I spent some more time in the workforce and did the Myers-Briggs assessment that I started to have this growing realization that, you know what, there's not just one way to do anything, including not just one way to lead. But it's hard to break. It's hard to break those expectations because they're so ingrained in society, especially in the professional space. So very frustrating at first because I couldn't figure out how to change. And then later because I realized, hey, I shouldn't have to change.
Yeah. Similar for me, actually, as well. I think in a lot of ways, though, once you get to that point of realization, it's literally an eye-opener, isn't it? Because you realize that as a leader and a manager as well, like, if this is true for me, then it's true for all these other people I'm dealing with. And actually, maybe there is no one right way of doing a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And for me, that opened the door into a whole new approach to leadership, really, which comes up constantly. Actually, it's always coming up in conversations I have with leaders about just because someone isn't doing it the way you would do it doesn't mean they're doing it the wrong way. And that can be transformational in terms of the results you get, the relationship with your team, and so much more besides.
Yeah, it is. And that's why it's really valuable to take an assessment like a Myers-Briggs with your whole team. So when I did it, I guess it was about 15 years ago, we had a leadership coach do a workshop for the whole organization where we learned about other people's preferences on their Myers-Briggs findings. And to me, it was exactly what you're saying, that I realized that just because other people do things differently than I do doesn't make them wrong or right. And it also showed me, I saw people, I learned that they had a set of preferences that were completely opposite to mine. And I said, oh, that's why you drive me crazy, right? Because you're approaching things completely differently than I do. But it also highlighted for me how I like to say the beauty's in the alphabet soup of your letters. So my Myers-Briggs profile is ISTJ, which is introverted, sensing, thinking, and judging. Someone who has a completely different set of letters is going to bring other things to a team or a project where there's a lot of value to that. You don't want someone on your team you don't want everyone on your team to be approaching things the same way. You want that mix of perspectives and strengths.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great point as well, because I was coming at it from the point of view of looking at other people doing things in a different way and going to that default assumption of they're doing it wrong because it's not the way I would do it. But actually, from the point of view of introverts and people going through imposter syndrome and low confidence and that whole area, it's quite often the other way around, isn't it? You're looking at the way other people are doing it, thinking they're doing it the right way.
Yes.
But you're so right. Like either way, it's not an automatic thing. It's just a different way. That's all.
Yeah. And if you see someone who's a leader in your organization and they're doing things a certain way, it's really easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I have to do it like she does it if I want to be the next leader or I want to be a leader one day. It's just not true.
Yeah. Yeah. So Myers-Briggs personality testing as well. I'll be honest, I've been fairly critical of these in the past, possibly due to a bad experience or two. But I think I've come around to a more balanced view of it, though, I think I see it more as it's a very useful tool for personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And where I am less sure is about the kind of the mandatory everyone do the test, and then we use that to define behaviour going forward.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets difficult, isn't it?
I totally agree with you. And I will say, I'm certified as a Myers-Briggs practitioner. And one thing we learn in the training is there's an ethical code to Myers-Briggs. And part of that is, as an employer, you cannot require someone in your organization to take a Myers-Briggs and a Myers-Briggs assessment. And you also can't see their results without their consent. I know. So I think that probably speaks to some of your concerns, right? That because people, if you think that your employer or your boss is going to see the test, one thing is it might skew the way you answer the questions in a way that's not authentic. And it's really, and I think you're getting at this as well, it's a guide. It's not something that's defining. So for example, even though my assessment says that I'm an introvert and I completely identify with that, there are times, professionally or personally, that I need to lean outside of my introvert comfort zone and act in ways that are more typically extroverted. So you're capable of doing things that are outside what your assessment says, and so you don't want to use it as in a way that dictates how you show up or says definitively, this is how either I or people I work with, this is what they're capable of or not capable of. But yes, as a guide to better understand yourself.
That's interesting. So both of those two caveats that you gave at the beginning were broken within minutes of the situation where I last took one.
Oh, wow.
It was one of those away day things, the off-site.
Retreat,
and we were just, it was planted in front of us. There was no conversation about whether we were allowed to not do it. And then immediately after everyone finished it, they did the thing where they put down all of the results in a big circle and you had to go and stand on where your result was. So not just your boss, but everyone in the company saw your result effectively.
Yeah, you should have to sign a consent form for that.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's unfortunate, but yeah, that's one of the ways it protects the validity of your findings, right? You shouldn't be thinking about how it's going to reflect on you when you're answering your questions. It should really be from a place of authenticity.
definitely, definitely. Although, I mean, one thing I would offer in defence of the bias argument, we
Yeah.
didn't know that everyone was going to know our results until after we'd already done the test. So I don't think that
Okay.
probably biased the way we filled it in.
No, that's bad in a different way, I guess.
Yeah,
But yes,
yeah, it
it
is.
would have led to the bias. Although I think if someone had told you, we want you to know your results are going to be confidential, maybe it would have helped you answer a little more forthcomingly. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting one. Do you find as well that people's results change over time as well? Do you think context plays a part in that?
great question. So generally speaking, your results should not change over time because really the way that I say it's like the way you're wired. So I'll give you an example. And I use this with my coaching clients. I ask them to pick up a pen with their dominant hand. And I ask them to sign your name with that pen using that hand. And they do it. And I say, what was that experience like for you? And they'll say things like, oh, it was mindless, easy. I didn't really have to think about it. And then I ask them to put the pen in the other hand and do the same thing. And then I say, how did that feel to you? And they'll say things like awkward, uncomfortable. It didn't come out as nice. And it's the same thing for your Myers-Briggs preferences. So my Myers-Briggs, my preference in terms of how I lose and gain energy from the world is that I'm introverted. So that's going to be my default setting. That doesn't mean, like I said earlier, that there are times I'm going to need to act a little more extroverted. So that's one piece of it. Generally, your assessment should be the same. Your results should be the same at any time in your life. However, the caveat to that is there could be times when you're in a particular situation in the organization you're working for, or you're in a particular phase of your life where something's happened that makes you answer the questions a little bit differently. And it could be you're under a period of particular stress or you're feeling like there's an expectation of your employer to show up a certain way. It could skew the way you answer the questions. And that's happened to me. I've been an ISTJ almost every time I took it, except for once. I showed up as an INTJ. And I remember it was actually when I was in graduate school and they had us take it. And I think my head was in a different space relative to the course I was taking. And so different thoughts were top of mind for me. But generally speaking, if you're an ISTJ, you're an ISTJ your whole life, whatever your four letters are.
Interesting, interesting. So people don't change, is what you're saying then?
They don't change, but they can change in how they express their introversion or they express their preferences.
Okay.
And in different environments, they might either feel the need to do that or just might naturally do that.
Okay, interesting. So I only took it once, and that experience was bad enough. I've never done it again. But I have done a few tests, like the introvert extrovert tests, which are a little bit more, well, a little bit less complex, I suppose.
Yeah, a little less scientific point.
So I mean, I guess same question about that, because my understanding of it is it's a scale, isn't it? Like it's not a binary choice. And there are other points on that scale, like there's this omnivert thing and ambivert, and I can't remember the difference between those, and there's that whole thing. So do you think people are like, once you're introverted, that's it for life, or might you move on the scale? Or this is a slightly loaded question, by the way. But
yeah, I do think that once you're an introvert for life, and the way you show up as an introvert in the world can change. Being more comfortable leaning outside of your introversion. And I will also say being more comfortable using your introversion. So a big focus of my coaching in my practice is to help introverted individuals tap into their strengths. I use a framework called appreciative coaching, which is all about identifying the best of who you are, which is known as your positive core, all of your strengths, including those that are associated with your introversion, like being a strategic thinker. Introverts tend to be highly empathetic. We're very good at data analysis. We tend to be very good writers. Just a few examples. So I guide people to figure out how can you use those strengths to show up more powerfully at work and to work to create a strategic plan for reaching your professional goals. And I say this because to answer your question, because I think that you can build your comfort and proficiency in using your introversion to be more effective and comfortable and recognized in your job.
Okay, interesting. So I'm not sure what to believe now with some of the results I've seen in myself
Yeah.
anyway. But so, I mean, hypothetically, and this, I guess, goes back to the context as well. Someone who, say, 10 years ago tested like top of the scale on introversion, but had been under like a sustained period of stress in a toxic culture for quite a long time. If they then took the test again now, having been out of that culture for a decade, is it possible that they're going to get a different result? And if so, like, how is there limits on that? It's a hypothetical, and I'm asking slightly tongue in cheek, but
I'm not familiar with the test that you're referring to, so I don't want to speak speak out of turn. But I think that I would guess it would be less about how your test result changes and more about how your introversion is showing up in society and in the workplace. Because I think you might still be wired, that you probably are still wired the same way as an introvert, but you may be more or less comfortable being out in the world as an introvert.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Yeah, I know that was a difficult question. It was a slightly unfair one as well, but
right.
Thank you for answering it anyway.
I'm game.
So, I mean, you've talked already a little bit about some of the things that introverts experience, the challenges they tend to face, the things they tend to be better at. I mean, what's your advice for an introvert who's really struggling with some of those challenges and wants a way to overcome them or turn them to their advantage, or both?
Yeah. So a few things. One is I think it's really important as an introvert at work to make sure that the people you work with, especially your manager, know how you're wired. Know what you need to be successful. And you don't even have to use the word introvert, because I think that's still a loaded word. And I think, unfortunately, it still has some stigma attached to it. And if you go to someone and say, hey, I just want you to know I'm an introvert, they could, they will in all likelihood attach some stereotypes to that. Oh, I guess that means you're not friendly. You don't like people. You don't want to collaborate with others. You're not going to network. All these things that are just not true. So I wouldn't necessarily use that word, but I think that it's really important when you first start to work with a new manager or with a team to share what you need to be successful. And you can do that in a few ways. One thing I love to recommend is the first time a team comes together, or a project team or a long-term team, is for everyone to go around the table and share with the group what's one thing you want everyone here to know about what you need to be successful, or what do you want them to know about what you need to do your best work. And that gives you an opportunity as an introvert, and it gives everyone an opportunity to do this, to say things like, I need to have a balance of collaborative time and solo work time. Or I'm going to give you my best ideas when I have time to think about them, rather than coming up with them on the spot. So it would be great for me it's important for me to have a meeting agenda in advance. And that's a best practice really for anyone. But as an introvert, it really helps you, because you can look at the topics that are on tap and prepare, do your research, get your thoughts together ahead of time. You could say, you're going to get your best ideas out of me when I can share them with you in writing, or when I meet with you one-on-one. Whatever it is that you think you need, share that with the team so they know. That's a big one.
Yeah. And I guess the key there is knowing yourself well enough as well to answer that question accurately and honestly.
Yeah. Another thing is, as introverts, we tend to be more drained, have our energy drained more when we're at work, engaging with other people. And this could happen in person or on Zoom. Really, if you have back-to-back Zoom calls all day, or whatever platform you're on, without the opportunity to recharge, we're going to be depleted at the end of the day. And if that happens day after day, it'll eventually lead to burnout, which harms us physically, emotionally, psychologically, the whole gamut. So what I recommend is making sure, when you're building your schedule each day, to build in buffer times. Make sure that if someone asks you, are you available for a meeting or a call, and you have 2 other meetings right around that, say no if you can. Or say, I can't meet with you at 10, but I can meet with you at 10:10, right? I need that 10 minutes to gather my thoughts, or to recharge, to take a bio break, to take a walk outside, whatever it is. And if you can, schedule those breaks on your calendar. Maybe it's a 30-minute break, a block that you put on your calendar around lunchtime or mid-afternoon, whenever it is that you feel you typically dip in energy, block that time for yourself. I know you can't always protect it, but to the extent that you can begin to set the expectation with your colleagues that, Stacey's not available from 2 to 2:30 each day.
Yeah, I mean, that's one area as well where it strikes me technology can really help. So like Calendly and TidyCal, which is the one I use, you can program in like any booking that's made in your calendar, it'll add a certain amount of buffer time, and you can set that. I mean, you could probably set it to a day if you wanted to.
Yes, I use Calendly, and I actually haven't used the buffer feature. I need to do that. I've only set up how far in advance people can schedule, but I should follow my own advice and do that there.
Yeah, it's just you set it once and then you don't have to think about it again. It just does it for you. It's great. I had to start doing it. I never used to, but I'm bad at sticking to timeframes on podcast episodes, I find. So if I don't put buffers in, I have people joining halfway through an episode.
Uh-oh.
But yeah, I mean, it is important though to have that recharge time. I mean, regardless of whether you're an introvert or not. I mean, even like the most outgoing extrovert, I think you need time to reset your brain between meetings.
Yeah. It's less of an energy thing and more of I think about like cleaning off the whiteboard, right? Getting the content from the last meeting out of your head and moving on to the next one.
Exactly. Yeah. And also like that time to process the meeting you've just come out of as well. Because otherwise that was wasted time, wasn't it? If you've not thought about it, embedded it. I don't know what the word is, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the manager's perspective, then, from the leader's point of view, what can they do to make sure they're supporting any introverts in their team and helping them to do their best work?
So you want to give your employees the opportunity to show up as their best selves in ways that are going to reflect their preferences. So one thing is consider communication channels that are available. You can make it known to your team members that they can communicate with you in writing or on instant messaging, rather than having to always come up with ideas or participate in meetings, right? What if you want, or maybe you want to meet with me one-on-one, I want you to know that option is available. Another thing you can do is recognize introverts' contributions. One of the big challenges we have as an introvert is speaking up sometimes, and then advocating for our ideas and contributions to be recognized. It's just not a comfortable space for us. So as a manager of someone who's introverted, recognize that and give your introverted employees the feedback that they need to know that they're making contributions, to know that you value them. That's something that we really need, and we worry that we're not going to get. And to your point just now, make sure they have time to process in between meetings, so that they have the opportunity to process, give additional thought where it's needed, and let them know, to the extent this is possible, that after they process on their own, they can come back to you with additional thoughts or ideas or contribution.
I find as well, particularly at that point about it's not always a great place for us to be making contributions or speaking up in meetings in particular. There's an issue, I think, with the way a lot of managers run meetings and a lot of leaders collect feedback, let's say, where we make a sweeping statement like, here's the plan or whatever. If anyone has any feedback on that, just say now or forever hold your peace. And
absolutely.
Any introverts in the room would just be, they're not going to say anything, are they? But the leader will then potentially walk out thinking everyone's happy with that because nobody had anything to say.
You're exactly right. And the introvert might be, it's like, oh, I'm not going to speak up for two reasons. One, they really need to have that. If this is the first time they're seeing the plan, that's not how we function best. So it's really important for us to get it in advance, or to say, all right, I want to sit with this and get back to you after. So that's one reason they want to have time to give it thought. And then two, which I think is what you're getting at mostly, is they're less comfortable interjecting. and finding time to insert their ideas. And that's something I talk to my introverted clients a lot about. How do you do that? And David, I have on my website, which is ifactorleadership.com, I have some free resources there. And one of them is a meetings playbook for introverts. So it's strategies to have your voice heard and your ideas shine. And I talk a lot about this. What are some ways that you can show up powerfully in meetings? And this is so important because the way you show up in a meeting, and if you're offering ideas or you're not, if you fail to do that well, people don't see your leadership potential. The way we show up in meetings is really a proxy in many ways for our leadership, for our competency. So when we can't do that well, it's really a missed opportunity.
Yes, that is annoyingly true, isn't it?
Yes.
The way we show up in meetings is a proxy for our leadership. Yeah. I mean, it's an open secret, but I hate meetings. Like, when I say I hate meetings, I mean the way they are usually done in a business environment, where somebody will just come up with like a 1-sentence description of the meeting. This is what we need to talk about, and then everyone just sits in that room with maybe 2 or 3 people talking about it for like 3 hours or something.
Gosh.
And you come out of it and like you've achieved nothing. You've not even really made a decision, because the end of the result was, yeah, we need to think about this more. Let's have another meeting next week or something. And it's so counterproductive.
Yeah. And that's when you're planning a meeting, it needs to be a lot more come together so we can talk about this topic, but it's so important to define the desired outcomes of your meeting ahead of time. Like, what is it that we are all committing to walking away with at the end of this? And it could be agreement on something. It could be a collection of ideas around something, whatever it is. But what's your purpose for coming together? And what are you all committing to achieving during your time together? And that also lets you prepare, which is so important for introverts. But if you see, okay, at the end of this meeting, we will have needed to come to a decision on this question, then you can think about, okay, what am I going to need to weigh in on that decision? I'm going to need this data. I'm going to need stories. I'm going to need evidence. I'm going to need last year's plan, whatever it is. That gives you an opportunity to pull that together ahead of time and bring it with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier that best practice, always make sure you send the agenda in advance. I mean, that's the first step towards a successful meeting. Someone I used to work with had this really great way of explaining what he saw as the perfect meeting and perfect way to do it. And I'll probably butcher it, but the essence of it was, what's the purpose of the meeting? Like, it shouldn't be to just get in a room and talk about something. It shouldn't even be for a progress update, frankly. Like, those things can be achieved in email or, at your desk or whatever. You don't need to gather 20 people together to do that. The purpose of the meeting should be the way he would talk about it. And I've tried to adopt this ever since, because it makes so much sense to me. There shouldn't be any discovery of new information in a meeting. Everyone in there, before you get there, you should have all the facts, and you should have done your background research. You should have read the agenda, read the background materials, whatever they are. You should enter that room informed about the subject. And then the purpose of the meeting is to reach a decision. And so if you
agree with that, yep.
Yeah. And if you don't come out of that meeting having come to a point of decision, then someone's not done it right, and the meeting isn't over.
Yeah. And there's always the possibility of, we can't come to a decision because there's some critical piece of information we don't have. But
that is a decision in a way, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. It is a decision. You're 100% right. But it helps you to stay on track. It also helps you as a facilitator to, if things are getting off track, to say, hey guys, I just want to remind you, our purpose today is this, or our desired outcomes are A and B. We haven't gotten there yet. And that is something, if you're an introvert facilitating a meeting, that's actually a very valuable tool, because it's a way to make your agenda the bad guy, right? It's not you. You have this objective tool to hold up and say, we need to move on, or we need to get back on track, because as you'll recall, this is what we agreed our desired outcomes are.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you've just hit another nail on the head there for something that a good meeting does, is someone's appointed as the facilitator to keep the meeting on track and make it go. They used to call it the chairman, but I don't like that phrase. Facilitator is much better.
Yeah. And I think chairman or chairperson implies that that person has the ultimate say, right? That they're going to listen to everyone else. A facilitator is more about moving the conversation along.
Absolutely. And yeah, it usually was chairman was the phrase used, regardless of who it was, which I always found problematic as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's so essential, I think, in any meeting, but also if, as tends to happen, I think, in this sort of conversation, if everyone in the room is at the same level of seniority, if they're all colleagues, you can't rely on a leader in the room making the decision at the end. So you've got to have someone in there as that facilitator. This is the agreed parameters.
Yeah.
And this is how it's going to work.
Yep.
Yeah, I kind of wish we'd done that. Every meeting I've ever had, pretty much, would have benefited from that.
I bet.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a bit about extroverts then. I think it's fair to say, in most people's minds, when you talk about leadership, unless they're really well informed or they spent a long time studying the subject, they will assume that the extrovert and their kind of characteristics or expected behaviours are a better fit for a leadership role than an introvert. Why do you think that is? And I almost don't need to ask whether you agree with it, because I'm pretty sure you don't. But
I don't agree with it. And so it comes down to corporate and cultural and societal norms. That's how we've been raised. That's what we've seen. That's what we've been told. That having a dominant presence, being assertive, being loud, these are what make leaders, not the other traits that are more inherent to introverts, like thoughtfulness and strategic thinking and empathy. And what happens is, because that's been the norm for so long, that is combined with the fact that we all tend to generally have a bias toward hiring and promoting people who are like us. So because extroverts have dominated leadership in corporations, nonprofit spaces, other fields, it gets perpetuated because the extroverts that are already in power are more inclined to hire and promote other extroverts. So it's going to take a long time to break that cycle.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it does take a certain level of maturity in leadership, doesn't it, to actively seek other leaders who are not like you. Not just in this scale, but in any other kind of demographic as well.
Another piece of it is when you're not speaking up, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, when you're not speaking up frequently with big ideas or any ideas, people have a much harder time recognizing your value and your leadership potential because it's not in their face the way it often is with extroverts. So you need to find other ways to shine and communicate the value that you bring to the table, including your leadership potential.
Yeah, no, that's a good point as well. Which of those introverted characteristics then would you say most line up with good leadership? Like, what makes introverts great leaders?
So I think this might be surprising to some people when I give my answer. I'm going to say empathy. Because being an empathetic leader means that you're able to recognize individuals' priorities, their nuanced needs. You're able to recognize nuances in challenges that your organization is facing. And it gives you insights into how you can design a program, a strategic plan, an event, a program to support your employees in ways that are most likely to have a positive impact, because you're able to read between the lines. You're able to look through the noise and see what needs to get done and how.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm biased the other way against extroverts. I don't know, but I think there is way more value in a leader who can just keep their mouth shut and listen, frankly, than one who has to process verbally. And I'm not assigning blame. That it's not the extrovert's fault either. That's the way they are. But I think that there's a lot as well to be said for having that conscious awareness of that's how you process it and being able to control that.
Yeah.
And I think it gets tied up a little bit in the last question as well, doesn't it? Around the way society expects, perceives, rewards those characteristics, because you get to that point in your career as an extrovert who is a leader. You've got that far because of the way you are and how you behave. And so you think that's a good thing, so you don't do anything about it. But yeah, I mean, for me, the best leaders I've ever encountered were the ones who would listen well, had empathy, took the time to understand people and build true, deep relationships with them. And most importantly, when something goes wrong, or even when there's a big deadline to be met, they were the ones working behind the scenes, making sure everyone had what they needed, were supported, filling in the gaps where needed, doing all of those thankless tasks that the top leadership rarely notice. Anyway, rant over. I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay. No, I hear what you're saying.
It's easy to kind of get biased about it, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because it's what we're used to. It's what when we've seen things done a certain way, or we see a certain type of person repeatedly be rewarded and promoted or hired, it reinforces for us, if we're not like that person, it reinforces for us that we're somehow not as good. We're somehow not enough. And, we need to change if we want to get the next promotion. And that's not the way to go. Pretending to be something you're not is rarely a success, rarely a formula for success.
Yeah, I mean, it might work in the short term, but sooner or later, it catches up with you. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about leadership itself then. What would you say from your career so far has been the biggest leadership lesson you've learned?
Hands down, the biggest leadership lesson I've learned is that to be an effective, influential, and happy leader, right? Happy with the role you're playing, you need to lean into your strengths and not pretend to be something you're not. And what that means is not only being comfortable with all the things you bring to the table as a leader and relying on those, but when you have the self-awareness of what leadership traits you do have and those that you do not have, then you can surround yourself with other people who fill those gaps. So for example, some of my leadership traits, part of my positive core, so to speak, is being highly empathetic, being a strong writer, and being a strong strategic thinker. I am not a wildly creative person, and I am not someone who is good with spontaneity. So part of my Myers-Briggs profile, that last letter is my J, which is my preference for judging, which means I like structure and planning. I can't, if I pretend to be spontaneous and I say, oh yeah, I can just go with the flow here, I'm so uncomfortable inside and it's just not going to go well. So there's this notion, there's a Harvard Business Review article, and I can share it with you in show links if you want, show notes. It's the notion of the incomplete leader. And the idea is no one person is going to have every leadership quality or trait that you need to run an organization, for example. So the idea is, you know which ones you have. It doesn't mean, but when you're lacking others, it doesn't mean that you can't lead or you won't be an exceptional leader. You just need the self-awareness of what you're lacking so that you can find other people to join your team who complement you with those traits or skills or preferences. Biggest lesson I've learned, and I wish I learned it decades ago.
Yeah. I prefer to think of it as skills and preferences, because I'm not sure I buy into the inherent traits arguments.
Okay.
At least not when it comes to leadership, because I mean, yeah, there's going to be personality elements that will make you adapt easier to certain parts of leadership or certain leadership behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, as you said about introverts, it doesn't mean you can't do things outside of that introvert scope. It just means it might be more difficult for you. What's really interesting to me as well is this idea, and I've heard it a few times, and I guess, I don't know, it's having a leadership team rather than a leadership individual. I think especially across a whole business, there's a whole cultural thing around the CEO and the entrepreneur and the founder and how, their word must be law and all of this sort of nonsense. But for exactly the reasons you've just explained, not just with leadership, not just with extrovert or introvert, but just as a person, no one is ever going to be that perfect that they can do all of these things really well by themselves. And unless you're the most arrogant narcissist ever, no one would say that of themselves.
Right.
So starting from that premise, that like lack of an assumption, surely a better way to do it would be to have a group of like 2 or 3 leaders who share that leadership among the 3 of them, playing to each of their strengths when needed, and you still got that decision making infrastructure, if you like. You've still got leadership, but you're not putting it all on one person's shoulders. And then if you can do that as well, like imagine all the stress and the burden that you're sharing as well. Like,
Oh, yeah.
It just makes so much sense to me. I don't know why more people don't do it.
Yeah, agree.
He says as a business of one who makes all the decisions by himself, but still.
So yeah, that letting go, and that's something that is harder for introverts as well. Delegating. Many of us, myself included, tend to be perfectionists. I like to say I'm a recovering perfectionist, but I'm early in my recovery. It's hard. It makes it hard to delegate because you think no one can do it as well as you can, or if someone does it differently, it's not going to be as good as the way you would do it. And because we're also, as introverts, we tend to be averse to conflict. The thought of delegating to someone and then not being happy with the way they're doing it, and then you have to have a conversation with them about it. How do you address it? It's just all outside of our comfort zone. And that's not great as an entrepreneur or as a business owner. It's to figure out how to move past that.
Yeah, I too am a recovering perfectionist. But what I find really helps is that I can be quite lazy as well.
Okay.
It's hard to be a perfectionist when you're lazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that.
It helps with innovation, though, I find, because you tend to look for the easiest way to do something, which tends to be the most efficient.
Interesting. Yeah, I see that.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that leaders and humans tend to make?
I think the biggest mistake is focusing on what you need to fix or improve rather than focusing on what's working and what your strengths are. There's I mentioned that my coaching uses a framework called appreciative coaching. That's actually the cousin or younger cousin maybe of an organizational framework called appreciative inquiry, which similarly takes an entirely positive focus on organizational change. So as an organization, instead of trying to fix what's not working, you focus on what is working and what's making that possible. How are we showing up as a team when we're doing our best work? And then how can we build on that? So I think we do it I think organizations do it and individuals do it. And what we focus on is what grows. So if you focus on your strengths, that's where your strengths are going to flourish and you're going to have opportunities to use them. And you're going to be, in all likelihood, a happier human.
Yeah, the example that always springs to my mind on this one is about like that personal development journey, particularly in the workplace, where you're always told, like, you do the SWOT analysis for your work life, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Identify your weaknesses, right? Those are what we're going to focus on. You're going to develop skills to address your weaknesses. And what that usually means is you get a little bit less bad at something you're already not very good at. But the thing you're good at suffers as a result because you're not focusing on it. And I think, yeah, it's just lazy management, isn't it? I know I said I was lazy just now, but still, like it's.
And I will say too that I remember when I used to have performance reviews when I worked for organizations and I hated them being in the hot seat, and that's how it always felt. I was always so much more interested in hearing what I wasn't doing well. What do I need to be a better employee? What do I need to work on? Right? Okay, great. Thanks for saying I'm good at this, or I did a great job on that project. What are my gaps? What do I need to fix? And that mindset that those are corporate norms, organizational norms that we're so focused on fixing what's not working or fixing on where we're falling short that you're exactly right that the stuff that you're doing, the stuff that you're doing well suffers because you shift to focusing on the things you're not doing well.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great ironies of it, isn't it? Because the line managers or the bosses, whatever you want to call them, they're in their mind, they're thinking, right, we've got someone who's not performing very well in this area. We need to address that. It'll increase performance of the organization, more profits, more output. Isn't that great? But the irony of it, of course, is that what happens is the things they're good at suffer, and therefore performance suffers, productivity suffers, profits suffer.
All those things.
and it becomes a self-fulfilling thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, really, when you think about
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
yeah, okay. So if I were to ask you what's been your best experience of being led, what would you say?
I don't know if you're going to like my answer. I have not had good experiences being led. But I have had, I couldn't think of, and I hope none of my former like head honcho bosses are listening to this podcast, but I have not had good experiences with people sitting at the top. But what I have had a great experience with are managers who I think lead in a different way. And what have made my managers, my best manager, her name is Kamala Allen. Hi, Kamala, if you're listening. She was my manager for almost 10 years when I worked for a nonprofit. And what made her so good as a manager, and she was the leader of our team. So I think that I can caveat, let me change my answer a little bit. Not the leader of an organization, but the leader of our team. And what made her exceptional was that she listened to each member of the team and she made us feel seen and heard. So she recognized what I was good at. She recognized what I needed, what type of support I needed from her, and the circumstances and support that I needed to show up and do my best work. And she was so wonderful at seeing me for me and then being the manager who I needed to be my most successful self.
I don't think you needed the caveats at the beginning. I think she
Okay.
absolutely counts as a leader.
Okay.
I think anyone can be a leader. It doesn't matter on the job title or any
I agree.
position in a hierarchy. So, yeah, and also it sounds like she did all of the things right that we've just been talking about as well. So,
She did.
great example.
Yeah.
And I hope she is listening. Yeah.
We still have an opportunity to work together. We're actually working on a project right now together, even though she's not my manager anymore. And that's a gift. So yeah, I'll mention the next time we talk, I'll let her know and I'll send her this podcast link when it comes out.
And that's a pretty good testament as well, isn't it? That you still have a relationship, even though you don't work together directly.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah, that's another test of good leadership, I think, is the longevity of the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think when you have a good leader, I have her in my head as a standard for leadership. So if I'm working with someone else, or I'm a manager of someone else in some capacity, it's that a model to emulate.
Yeah, it's the benchmark, isn't it? Yeah, I think most people have that. I don't know if they consciously think about it or are aware of it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I
you're
think
probably
we're all comparing the leaders we encounter to the ones we've encountered before.
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, this question is usually the most difficult. See how you get on with it. If you could start your career over again, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, I wish I had the mindset when I started my career, a mindset um, of strengths and positivity. I wish that my younger self knew that the way you're built, the way you're wired is perfectly fine. Don't try to be something you're not. And when you lean into who you authentically are, a whole world of possibilities are going to open up for you. And um, I don't think whatever I did across my career brought me to this moment. And I love the moment I'm in right now. So I don't know if I would do anything differently uh, at the macro level, but I think I would have been a happier person if I had had this mindset much earlier in my life.
Yeah, it's the time travel paradox, though, at that point, isn't it? Because if you'd been more comfortable or more aware of it at that point in your life, would you still have ended up where you are now? Or yeah,
Yeah,
I love this question.
there's so many random, well, maybe not random, but so many seemingly small decisions I made or turns my career took that
So,
if not for those, I wouldn't be sitting here talking with you today.
exactly. Yeah.
And I've grown as I've moved through my career. I'm at the point too where I'm much more open about what the universe brings me and being open to opportunities that aren't necessarily what I expected.
Yeah, that I found that as well. Since I've been in business by myself, there's things I say yes to that I never would have
Mm.
never would have before. And equally, there's things I say no to that I probably wouldn't have either. So I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, time's been flying. I have one question left for you. It's my absolute favourite one, though.
Leadership heroes.
Everyone has to answer this one.
Okay.
It's not optional, I'm afraid. So it's leadership heroes. If you had to pick one person, but it could be anyone you could think of, like from all of time and space, I suppose. So like alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, if you like. But it's got to be someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So who would that person be for you and why?
I'm going to answer the question, but I'm giving you a caveat. My caveat is that there's no perfect leader. But the person I'm going to say the reason I'm identifying her is because she relied on her introverted gifts to be a leader and did so in, I think, almost a perfect way. And that's Rosa Parks. So for your listeners, your audience not familiar, Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat during the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama, and really ignited or catapulted the civil rights movement. And many people might not know that Rosa Parks was an introvert, and she was actually, her decision to not give up her seat on the bus was not a spontaneous decision. She was actually part of the movement before that day and was very intentional in how she planned that decision to do that. She didn't speak up. She just refused to move. And that communicated her power in a way that was very different than someone who might have been shouting on the bus or standing outside loudly protesting on the bus. She wasn't loud. She wasn't boisterous. She was just calm. She was committed, and she was deeply determined. And the leadership role that she played in the civil rights movement is can't be overstated.
The power of silence comes up fairly regularly, actually, doesn't it, in the leadership context as well? And we've kind of alluded to it today already. And yes, it's a good caveat. You're not the first to say that one either. And it is a slightly unfair question, I know, but, it's a bit of fun at the end of the episode.
Yeah, it was fun to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great choice, though. Great choice. And I like the reasoning and the backstory there as well. Great illustration of an introvert leader, I think. So, very on brand. Well done.
Okay.
Well, Stacey, it's been a great conversation. Thank you again so much for being with us. Last thing I'll ask you is if any of the listeners would like to learn more about you, what's that website again? Is there any social links as well? Anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, people can find me at ifactorleadership.com. And if you go there, you'll see a tab at the top with free resources, including my meetings playbook. I have a conference survival guide for introverts, including networking strategies, and also daily productivity hacks for introverts. So how to stay more productive, get more done at work with less stress. And then you can also schedule using that same link, a free 30-minute introvert career strategy call. ifactorleadership.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn at ifactorleadership.
Lovely. Okay, well, and those links will, of course, be in the show notes, so everyone can find those easily.
Wonderful.
Stacey, I'll let you go because I know you have another meeting to get to. So thank you again for being here. And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, David. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Stacey, thank you again so much for your time today. Plenty of value in there. Listener or viewer, I hope you learned plenty from that episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did both of those things. If you would like to learn more about Stacey, take her up on that offer of some of those free resources. You will find the website and links to her LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So as always, I encourage you, click on those links and go and learn more. We talked a fair bit today about how to get your voice heard as a leader, especially if you're an introvert. But if finding your leadership voice is something that you want to work on, something you're struggling with, if imposter syndrome or knowledge gaps, or the changing relationship with some former colleagues that you're now leading, or at least are no longer on that same level as, is something that you're struggling with, then good news. Leading with Integrity is here to help. There is a website with some helpful information and resources. There is also an online community called Integrity Leaders, where you can meet and learn from, support, and be supported by other leaders at similar stages of their career or leadership journeys, as well as a whole load of extra courses, articles, early access to this podcast, and more besides. So if you'd like to learn more about that, do come along to the website. It's www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk. Explore the site, take advantage of some of those resources, have a go at the Leadership Heroes quiz as well, and find out who your preferred leadership hero might be. And of course, click on that green button, come and join us at Integrity Leaders. And don't forget, as a podcast listener, as a loyal supporter, you can use the discount code HalfOff24. It will give you 50% off the standard membership tier forever, for as long as you remain a member. You can't say fairer than that, can you? Hope to welcome you there soon. And of course, as always, do feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you just want to have a talk about leadership sometime. That's all from me today. The only thing left to say really is thank you for being with us this week. Hope you'll be back next week when I'll be talking to mindset, business, and award-winning stress coach, Raj Soren. Not one to be missed if you have even a slightly stressful job. And in the meantime, remember, be a leader, not a boss. I think someone's chosen music.
Oh no, really? I'm curious what the topic was. That's interesting.
Can't remember who it was, but I'm sure it's
so different.
I may be misremembering. I'll give you half bonus points.
All right. Thank you.